Welcome back to the show. Today's show is sponsored by I don't know. It's the name of it's a Ukrainian oil and gas company. I can't remember how you pronounce
the Burmese executives.
Right.
So this Burmese, they say pronounce it Burmese.
By the way, no one has ever said that to anyone. The company's name is Burisma. Or I suppose if you're trying to build up a story in 2019.
The company that his son worked for, that's Burmese.
Buramisma.
Burmese.
Right. So the guy who put this story together, who was dealing with this, saying, he said, Dale Perry said, at times when I was putting the story together, I felt like I was paranoid. And going on a little bit. I don't want to say, he says, and going a little bit, I don't want to say a little bit crazy, but maybe I would say it that way. Because it's, again, what Trump was attempting to do with Rudy Giuliani and Lev Parnas is baseline bribery. It's just, you do this, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It is the kind of stuff you would see old Chicago alderman criminality, just on a scale, just blown up a little bit. The kind of stuff that Trump would try in blackmailing a building contractor so he could get an extra floor added to a building that he didn't even invest in. He just was going to slap his name on it. And just like, well, it's a matter of scale. If we can get, all you have to do is get 10 more people to say yes and 20 more people to keep their mouth shut. Well, that's a matter of power at a certain point, in theory. The problem is scrutiny gets bigger once the dollars get bigger because a lot more other people have their money on the line. And when it comes to worldwide investment in the Ukrainian oil and gas sector, if you're going to attempt to undermine an entire country that is allied with the rest of our allies in Europe, that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so watching this play out has just been beautiful. Now, we are... I would be remiss if I didn't cover the fact that all the way across town, in the southern Florida part of this story, there is also a lot of sketchy monetary stuff going on around young Matt Gaetz. Now, young Matt Gaetz is the son of, I think his name is Don Gaetz. He's a local state rep or a state senator in Florida, who's had a long and storied history of starting a nonprofit healthcare company, turning it into a for-profit one, and then selling it to a giant company and becoming a millionaire. And if you'll recall, by the way, what's the linkage between Rudy Giuliani and Matt Gaetz, other than the fact that they are complete and utter morons in terms of criminality, and they are incapable of operating any kind of big equipment when it comes to... They probably make, both of them, between the two of them, fairly decent shoplifters. But neither one of them is going to, pull off a giant bank heist,
Yeah, they've got the conscience for the criminal life. They can rationalize anything.
Yep, just not capable of pulling it off. Thank God. And so we know that Matt Gaetz has his own Lev and Igor in Joel Greenberg. Joel Greenberg is a former Seminole County tax collector who loved to wear a badge and a gun like he was a cop, which, again, having grown up in Kentucky and knowing the descendants, literally going to elementary school with the descendants of moonshiners, who, by the way, transformed their careers and left the criminality of bathtub gin and distilleries, fake bourbon, and went to the totally legit industries of giant corn and tobacco fields with pot fields in the middle of them hidden in the greenery, up on the up and up, as it were, that you're aware that the revenuers, which is what they used to call the tax collectors, were the guys who would come after you to bust you for having stills, for growing illegal crops one of the ways they get you, besides having a controlled substance, what do we do if he's already sold it? It's out the window. He's just got a bunch of money, but we don't have any proof. He's got a bunch of plants. I don't know if I ever told you this, Johnny, but my dad, across the river from across the creek, across the Elkhorn Creek from our house in Kentucky, a woman and her husband lived there, and she was an actress. She was the only person I knew that was a professional actor when I was a kid. She was in Coal Miner's Daughter. She's the one that shacks up with Tommy Lee Jones and is in the car when Sissy Spacek throws the car open. That's the actress. She's played by my neighbor across Elkhorn Creek, Susan Kingsley. And she was also a chorus girl in Popeye. She got some work. And sadly, she was killed in a car accident. And that was a lesson to me in some ways to like go for your dream early, because she sort of she got her career was a lot slower taking off because she lived in Kentucky and they didn't move out of there. But her husband was a farmer, and he farmed on the hillside behind the creek that was across from our place. And one of the ways they paid the bills was they grew pot. The cash crop of pot has kept Kentucky afloat forever. That's why, Mitch McConnell surprised everyone with coming out as pro-hemp at one point. Well, hemp is one of the ways that you kind of hid the pot that you had, right? You would grow it and rotate it as a crop. And still, it was on the DL in Kentucky, right? So
sure.
My dad told this story about we had the Peaks Mill Christian Church in our town, and it was a little white Christian church in every sense of the word. And it was your kind of average run-of-the-mill, small, steepled white church, and with a graveyard and a pastor's house, and that was it, right? And there was some Bible thumpers. We had 3 or 4 of them who were hardcore, borderline Amish in their attitudes, and one of them suspected that our neighbor was growing pot on his property. But he couldn't put it together. And he drove over there one day, and it wasn't this neighbor. It was another neighbor up the road. And he had come over to talk to this guy who lived across from us who was growing pot. And he had just harvested his pot. He was dragging gigantic pot plants up the hill, baled together, so he could remove the leaves and then take the stalks and separate all the stuff, go through the work of it inside the barn. So he would drag it, and here he comes. He's dragging this giant bale of this, it looks like a human-sized asparagus clump. Like when you go to the grocery store and you see asparagus and they've got them rubber banded together. He's dragging this 8-foot-long thing of pot plants. I mean, pounds and pounds of this stuff up his driveway. And here he sees this guy leaning against his car. This hyper-religious anti-drug crusader. And he is dragging this enormous pile. It's no way he won't know what this is. And he's sweating bullets. Oh my God, what am I going to say to this guy? Here he's there. I can't turn around. I can't roll it into the creek and lose my crop. This is how I pay my mortgage, for crying out loud. He's dragging this thing up, and as he gets closer and closer, he doesn't know what he's going to say, and finally he looks the guy in the eye and he goes, "Have you checked your property?" And the other guy goes, "What?" By the way, I'm not giving the names because these people still live there. He goes, "Have you checked your property?" He goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I found this growing on the edge of my property. These kids are growing enormous crops of pot everywhere they possibly can. It's down by the river near my property, whatever. I'm going to take it and destroy it. So I dragged it all up here. I'm going to show it to the cops so they know it's going to happen." And that afternoon, that guy went, "Oh my God," hopped into his car and drove over to his own property to check and see if these mythical children were growing weed on his property. And while he did it, he stripped all the pot off the plants, and then he burned a giant pile of the stalks so that guy would see the smoke, basically, from the road.
Okay.
To hide the fact that he's like, I'm burning all this stuff so I don't get in trouble. And that sharp thinking always cut it. And you know me, I don't do any drugs. I have no interest, none whatsoever. I'm not smoking pot. I'm not doing any of it. Everybody else, welcome to. Knock yourself out wherever it's legal now. Have a fun. I'm not interested. But it certainly cuts against the idea that it makes you thick. Because that was pretty smart thinking. That was amazingly clever at that moment, right? None of these folks, none of the Gates crowd, none of the Giuliani crowd are anywhere near that level of clever.
No.
But what was it, besides being completely incompetent, that links these two stories together, Giuliani and Matt Gaetz? I'm going to tell you. We got to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to tell you what the linkage is between these two morons and their absolute. Yes, that's true. There's another one though. Yeah, okay. Touche, my friend. Touche. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. So, I recognize while we were in the break, Johnny and I were talking, and I forgot to tell you guys that what the John Kerry thing was in terms of dealing with Ukraine and Russia versus that is that when we were talking about the Iraq War and why we got into Afghanistan in the first place and all this stuff and how we end it, John Kerry said we should treat this like what it is, a law enforcement issue. That Al-Qaeda is not a state group. That ISIS now is not a state group. It is a criminal organization. They fund themselves through blackmail, kidnapping, and drugs. They murder people. It's a mob. So treat it like the mob. Work with Interpol, our other countries. Weed it out that way. Then you'd have to go, we got to go after Muslims and we got to go after anybody born of Syrian descent or some nonsense, because it ain't that. And it's that's where the Muslim ban, idea that Trump was pushing. Nobody from these countries is allowed in our country because they're dangerous. Well, a lot of the people who are trying to leave those countries and want to come here and contribute because they would be lovely people to have amongst us as immigrants are trying to escape the horror and the violence and that this mob, this criminal endeavor is carrying out. Now, you can have a religious mob. You can have the criminality of the 14th century Catholic Church. You can have Murder Incorporated, the Jewish mob and the like. They're not mutually exclusive. So you can say this particular sect of Muslims, mainly the ISIS crowd, have nothing to do with everybody else. But that's the group we're going after. And we're doing it in a law enforcement way, not this country, these borders, this kind of, because it's an oversimplified idea. And that's where you end up having sympathizers fall through the cracks and end up killing people. So John Kerry suggested, rightly so, that we deal with what's going on there as a law enforcement problem. We cut off their funding. We get them arrested. We recognize who they're coming in contact with. We surveil just like we would with drug dealers on the street. If we know that a drug supplier is calling someone regularly, that person on the street is probably more than likely getting deliveries and sending money to and from, unless they're a direct relative who doesn't have a criminal record, is going, please stop being a drug supplier. Like, I call you every day, 3 times a day, trying to tell you that. Unless they're that, and one wiretap will let you know, and exclude that person, and then you can go back to the busy work of only chasing the criminals, because why would you want to go after the religious grandmother of the drug dealer going, will you please? Come on now. Stop dealing the drugs. So, if we treat what's going on in Ukraine as what it is, which is mob-level criminality, which greases the wheels of its criminality through bribery of government officials, it's not that hard to grasp. It really, really isn't. So there was an article in the Washington Post, I think it was, or New York Times, yesterday, about how that's how the Biden administration is treating Russian conspiratorial behaviors in other countries, murdering people in. Stop looking at Russia like it's a country. The country and the people are not what is being imposed on them from the top down. The functioning government of Russia is not a functioning government. It is a mob. It is a mob-ruled circumstance. And it is not indicative of what the Russian people want. It's not indicative of what would be best for the Russian people. And it's certainly not would be indicative of what they would vote into existence had they the chance at a legitimate election. Or, Putin wouldn't have to have passed a law, signed a bill himself magically that allows him to stay in power till 2036. So you wouldn't need to, right? So what's the tie though between Rudy Giuliani's ridiculous, flailing, moronic criminality and Matt Gaetz's moronic criminality? What is it, Johnny? What do you think?
What's the... They both think that they all think that they deserve more.
Way too philosophical. They both went on Tucker immediately after getting busted to cover their butts. Tucker Carlson.
Every time you tell me that there's a Tucker Carlson interview with these people, the day after, I'm in disbelief. But I shouldn't be anymore.
Yeah, it is literally Rudy Giuliani goes on the same day as the raid. And again, this raid didn't happen and then we're going to find out. Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, we were saying during one of the breaks that they don't do the raid until they already have enough.
Yeah. I mean, that's when they recognize, because what's happening is that they are looking for the other confirmation that you either tried to erase emails on your own devices or got rid of stuff, which gives them, what's the one thing that in court, when you talk about the level of a crime, that's very important? It's awareness of guilt. The idea that you know what you're doing is wrong. And that makes the difference between a second-degree murder charge and a first-degree murder charge. If we find text messages that says, I'm going to kill them, and that's why I'm headed over to their house right now, you can't later say, if those text messages were erased or didn't exist or we don't know of them, you could say, look, I went over there just to talk, and he attacked me, and then I defended myself with a knife I had in the truck. Like that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But if we find those emails or those text messages where you had told people, I'm going over to his house to stab him in the throat, it makes it much harder, right? Obviously. Now, if the government finds out that you said that, but your argument is, yeah, I said that, but it was just hyperbole. I wasn't going to go over there and do that. I was just mad. And then I went over there. I didn't even have, it was
You know how
night.
you say stuff.
You know how you say stuff. Yeah, you know how you email someone that you're going to go murder your ex, right? Yeah, just send. I was mad, right? Yeah, send, right? CC everybody. That if you go home and go, while you're washing off your knife and cleaning up your clothes and creating a bonfire of evidence in the backyard, that you go and you erase emails from your devices. Well, get rid of that text, because you're dumb enough to think they only exist on your phone. What does the state have? The state now knows that you sent an email threatening a crime, you went and committed that crime, and then you came home and you went, I threatened a crime, I should probably get rid of that too. You got rid of the evidence, you have an awareness of your own guilt. And therefore, that's the difference between the crime of passion and a planned crime, right? That's why they need your devices. They want to know if you think you can get away, Rudy Giuliani, with hiding your stuff. Or if you thought you deserved the right to do it, which is another one. Like, Your Honor, he has no remorse. He just decided, hey, you're damn right. You're...
And I'd do it again.
Yeah, that's right. You can't handle the truth. That was better than I thought it was going to be.
That was really good.
It was pretty solid, absolutely. You want me on that wall. I'm not going to push it. But
yeah, no, leave it there.
Leave it there. It was good. I'll add that to my one-line impersonation. So these guys, Lev and Igor, get busted. They get all their stuff. They get a warrant for Rudy's stuff, and then they go and get his stuff. Matt Gaetz goes on Tucker, that night, and if you haven't heard my song Florida Man, go to infotainmentwars.com and check out my Florida Man song where he gets a name check, as does Trump and the idiots around him. And over the course of watching them do this, over the course of watching, this kind of play out with the Matt Gaetz story, he goes on Tucker and says, this is all crap, never happened, I don't know what they're talking about, they would never. And then we find out yesterday, that Joel Greenberg wrote a letter to Roger Stone saying that he and Matt Gaetz paid for sex with a minor. A 17-year-old girl that they trafficked possibly across state lines. And the density of this letter, and this guy is cooperating. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about Republicans. We're talking about, does anybody remember 90s Republicans or Reagan Republicans or even the early 2000s family values, right? You can't have gay marriage. It's going to destroy the family structure. These gay people, they're too promiscuous to what? Get married? What does that mean? I was always confused by that. These people sleep around too much, so stop them from trying to be in normal monogamous relationship. I don't get it. So that was the complaint, right? But that's all we ever heard from these morons. The family will be destroyed. The nuclear family is going to be destroyed if we don't let gay people. If we let gay people get married, we are the people. We're good Christianness. Donald Trump has been set by Jesus himself. His guided hand is writing executive orders, making sure that DACA recipients are on thin ice all the time. Like, what? So the idea that these are the mega Christians, right? These are MAGA churches, right? And then, we're up against the half-hour break. When we come back, I want to read to you there's a lot to this story, the Matt Gaetz story and the Joel Greenberg and them hanging out stuff. That's just run-of-the-mill skeevy bros, right? And there's a lot that I honestly think, when you're talking about consensual adults doing stuff, none of my business. None. But there's some parts of this that stand out even above and beyond the Trumpsters and maggots writing off Donald Trump's 27 sexual assault allegations and the fact that he's going to have to get deposed by E. Jean Carroll. Go, E. Jean Carroll. She follows me on Twitter. I'm very proud. But even worse than that, like to the point where it makes people who don't normally go, ooh. Yeah, we'll be back right after this.